Welcome everyone, this is On Just Restart, and today I want to talk about Pokémon Scarlet and Violet, but from a somewhat different angle. I actually have not played the game yet. It has come out today. I have it loaded up on my Switch, but I just haven't had the chance to get into it yet. But this weekend, I will be digging deep into this game. But a very, very common criticism for these games is the performance. As we've seen from reviews and previews, things aren't looking spectacular. Their frame rate is shoddy, there's pop-in, there's a lot of textures aren't so great. This game isn't necessarily a proper demonstration of what the Switch hardware can do. Now that said, we are getting late into Switch's life cycle. Games are starting to look more and more dated. Some games seem like they're meant for more powerful hardware. But ultimately with Scarlet and Violet, I think it comes down more to Game Freak and Pokémon Company and the deadline they set for this game, because clearly it's not running as well as we would have liked. But with that said, is that enough to ruin our experience of these games? I know I've been looking forward to these games, and I'm just kind of curious what everyone else thinks. I'm sort of recording this spur of the moment. Honestly, I have so much going on right now. Work is really tough, life is really tough, and I've been looking forward to Pokémon Scarlet and Violet because I want an escape. And, you know, there are different games throughout history that I've used as an escape, but Pokémon has been a common one. There have been some really rough times in my life where I've taken solace by enjoying the world of Pokémon. And with Scarlet and Violet, I'm kind of looking forward to that again. But with all these performance issues we're hearing about, I'm wondering, will it impact or mar my experience to such an extent that it won't feel like a proper escape for me? And that I don't know because I haven't played the games yet. So in the coming days, there probably will be some sort of update here on the channel speaking on my thoughts on the game and how I feel about the overall experience. But I do want to take this moment to sort of focus on how performance and graphics can impact our experience. Because sometimes I feel like performance issues, graphical fidelity, honestly, the importance of those things can be exaggerated. Not always, it goes both ways. I feel like there are times it can really hamper your experience. It can really take away from the immersion of the experience. And as I said, I want to play Pokemon as an escape, to fully immerse myself into that world and forget about everything else for a while. And from what we're seeing and hearing of these games, the issues seem pretty significant. That said, I have seen in the past where people pick particular moments and parts and really complain about those parts and don't highlight the good things. I've seen that before, and I feel like until I play the game for myself, I won't truly know. But I'll say this, Legends Arceus, that came out earlier this year, January, and there were similar conversations about performance and graphics fidelity, and playing through the game, there were a lot of weird looking textures and not everything looked amazing. But overall, for a Pokemon game, which, you know, that's a whole other conversation for a Pokemon game, but I was impressed overall with my experience with Legends Arceus. I would argue it's one of, if not the best Pokemon experiences yet, because it was an escape for me. It did that, despite its performance issues, despite its graphics not being up to par with the rest of the industry. What I got to enjoy from that world was amazing. I did feel immersed. I never got to interact with Pokemon in such a way ever before. It was dynamic. It felt like I was living in an actual Pokemon world where these Pokemon were reacting to you as if they were actual true wild animals and there was a threat there. And there were these beautiful environments to explore. Yes, they were simplistic in a lot of ways, but still they represented something that was fun, and then the music really helped to support that, and obviously the Pokemon as well. So my experience with Legends Arceus, I would even go as far as saying, was profound. Whenever I go back to it, it does stir some feelings for me. It does bring up some nostalgia, even though the game only came out earlier this year. And that was also made by Game Freak. I think they overall did a pretty darn good job. Room for improvement, for sure, but it was a huge step in the right direction. And I'm not saying I need every game to be like Legends Arceus. I like the traditional Pokemon formula. Granted, there are ways they can update that, and for what we've seen with Scarlet and Violet, the open world style, the different paths you can do, doing them out of order, the interactivity we've seen with the Pokemon, the Let's Go mechanic. There's a lot of things here, including some components that carried over from Legends Arceus, that I'm really excited about. But the impression I have from the reviews I've seen, from the things people have shared on social media, it seems like the performance issues are worse than Legends Arceus. And that's probably the biggest blot on Legends Arceus, because everything else about that game was pretty superb. So with Scarlet and Violet, I've heard good things about the rest of the game. The gameplay is great, the content is great, the direction of the game is great, the new mechanics are great. But I've seen situations where you throw a Pokeball and the environment just changes dramatically. I've seen moments where the game almost looks like it halts for a few seconds. I've seen a lot of pop-in, so much so it's like right in front of you. And when I say pop-in, for those who don't know what that means, basically when you're traversing an open world or an open area, when you see objects like trees or rocks or landforms or even characters or creatures sort of just appear suddenly in front of you without any sort of like natural way of appearance like you would in the real world. That would be pop-in, and that can take away from your immersion. So when I see these things, it does concern me. That said, I have seen people say and mention these things, but still say they enjoyed the game, that it didn't ultimately stop them from really falling in love with this experience. Now, it's not for everyone. The reviews are mixed. This isn't going to go down as the highest reviewed Pokemon game ever. Maybe not the worst, it seems like it's more par for the course, but a little bit on the lower end of things, probably mostly due to the significant issues with performance. But ultimately, I think it is going to come down to each person. I know when it comes to frame rate, there are people who can't even necessarily tell the difference between 30 and 60. It's usually not obvious until you stare at them side by side or you go from one experience to the other. And when I think about particular games where frame rate has been a talking point about that game, I think back on it and it really didn't impact my experience at all. Take Breath of the Wild for example. There were areas in that game, such as the Great Plateau and the Korok Forest, where supposedly there are performance issues, but to tell you the truth, I still ultimately loved those environments even though there were performance issues. And I played the game at launch before some updates that improved the overall performance of the game. But there are other games in comparison to Breath of the Wild that have far worse issues. Let's talk about No More Heroes 3 for example. I really enjoyed that game, just for the record, but exploring the open environment of the city, well, there were moments I'd be driving around and the game would just stop. And there was a lot of collision issues and things of that nature, and it wasn't an overall polished or smooth experience. And it definitely impacted my overall enjoyment of the game, and it definitely impacted my enjoyment of going from one point to another in No More Heroes 3. The main missions, the main fights, super enjoyable, love them. But there were significant parts of that game that weren't perfect, and it definitely impacted my immersion. Still a good game, but I think it stopped it from becoming a great game. So then, taking another look at Scarlet and Violet, the game is an open world experience. Traversal throughout this entire environment is the most important element of this game, and interacting with that Pokemon. So I'm very curious how it's going to be handled overall, how it'll feel once I've played through this experience. Am I going to feel like, man, this is kind of a slog going through this? Man, I'm constantly reminded of characters popping in. It just doesn't feel like a world I can truly believe and get myself immersed in to find that escape that I kind of need right now, personally speaking. I don't know, but I'll find out this weekend. But what do you guys think? How do you feel about performance issues in your games? Are you worried about the performance issues we've seen for Scarlet and Violet? Is it going to ruin your experience for these games? Or is it not? Or is it somewhere in the middle? Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Anyways, everyone, this is On Just Restart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.